And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Benched with Bubba, episode 124. Going to talk some fantasy baseball, kind of recap the season, and talk to a person that did very, very well in the bigger leagues around the industry. You can find his work over on RotoWire. He's has a weekly podcast with our buddy James Anderson. He's on the radio and Sirius XM with them. And he's on Twitter at Clay W Link. Clay, how we doing, man?
Good. I appreciate you having me, man. This is fun.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it for sure. We could have sat and not recorded and just watched the baseball game together, but I think we got to get going after Yelich went deep. So it's only time.
Get that out of the way before we get live. That's probably good.
Yeah, probably a good idea there. Let's just get right to it. We're going to talk a lot about kind of how your strategy worked out because, as you know, playing fantasy baseball for so long, it's such a long, grinding season. So many things have to kind of go your way. You work the wire correctly. You got to avoid the big injuries. There's so many factors involved in baseball. Before we get into that, though, why don't you just let everybody know your laundry list of you won a league I was in, but what else did you accomplish this year?
Well, I was fortunate enough to take down first overall in the Great Fantasy Baseball Invitational. I won my league in the NFBC Online Championship, finished tied for 8th overall there. First in CBS Sports AL Analyst League. First in the Sirius XM Host Dynasty League. Second in AL Labor. Second in Tout Wars Head-to-Head. So, yeah, it was a pretty good year. I won my hometown league, but I had some few stinkers in there as well. But overall, it was a really good year, my best ever. And so, 2017 really wasn't a great year. So now I'm just trying to just get back to the grind and try to repeat.
No, I love it. That's a heck of an accomplishment. Like you just mentioned a handful of leagues you're in, and you're with a lot of the big guys in those leagues. So to do that is very, very good. I know RotoWire as a whole did very, very well. And DVR, one of your co-hosts on the radio and other aspects did very, very well. James Anderson, I believe, did well in his TGFBI also. So, yeah, you guys did very well. I did not.
Why I did well. We have a great crew here and kind of riding their coattails a little bit.
Yeah, when I interviewed James, might have been mid-season time around the trade deadline with prospects and everything. I was telling him I've been a RotoWire subscriber for years just because the content you guys put out, the people you guys have, it's a great tool, and I really do enjoy the work you guys put in there. So it shows getting to sit there and pick those brains every day. Definitely, it doesn't stink.
I appreciate that. Yeah, we got a lot of kind of unsung heroes too behind the scenes. We have an army of breaking news and rap guys who it's kind of a thankless and not a glamorous gig to do that, but they do a great job, and we wouldn't be what we are without them.
No, I love it. The TGFBI is like I said, the one I was in didn't fare so well in League 6, but I had just a slew of injuries and many excuses I can make. The fact that you won the overall, not just your league, the overall is darn impressive because that was a lot of people in there. We don't have to go kind of a league-by-league basis, but just as a whole, since you did so many leagues, what kind of strategies, or did you have like one main strategy or types of strategies did you use when you went into these drafts?
Kind of more generally, I didn't want to pay up for pitching within the first 4 or so rounds typically. I wanted to try to load up on the hitting side. Was able to do that. I knew that there were certain players, it was kind of a player-specific strategy. I knew I wanted Trinan at the price. I knew I wanted Snell. I knew I wanted Clevenger. Those guys were really common denominators in a lot of leagues, and that was huge. Getting those 3 guys to anchor your staff, carry you, they'll make up for some busts early on. And I think I generally wanted to go hitting heavy, but then pitchers within that 4 through 8 range. And so in that range, got quite a few shares of guys like Verlander, guys like Aaron Nola too, So pitching was really my strength in pretty much every league. In AL Labor, I had 59 out of a possible 60 pitching points. Still finished second just because, my offense was not very good. But, that was generally the theme for every team is that my pitching carried the day.
That's outstanding. You mentioned that strategy because there was kind of 2 schools going into the draft season last year. It's A, you needed to get one of the stud pitchers. That's what some people thought. Or B, what you did, which is kind of more kind of the old school philosophy is we're going to wait on pitching and we're going to get the bats and go that way. And it seems for the most part that was the successful approach this year, because with the injuries you saw, certain guys getting banged up, getting those big time bats like you were talking about, and then getting the Snells and the Trinans obviously turned into be just ace pitchers for your staff. Were there any other players that maybe you weren't targeting out the gate, but were kind of guys that it seemed were always common on your team outside of like the Snells and the Trinans of the world?
That's a good question. I ended up with Walker Buehler, a lot of spots. That was fortunate. And I give James Anderson some more love there because I probably wouldn't have been on him if I hadn't heard James pump him up for so long. Jack Flaherty, similar case there. Hitters, I had a lot of like Carlos Santana didn't work out, but Xander Bogaerts was big. And it's not like Carlos Santana was that bad. He was fine. But more so the guys I had in common in most leagues were on the pitching side. And on the hitting side, it was just kind of piecing it together. Bogarts, Malik Smith, and TGFBI was huge. And a few leagues like Online Championship, I got Juan Soto off the wire, and that was a game changer, obviously.
Mm-hmm. That's huge. What league was it you were mentioning before we started that you had Christian Yelich?
Had him in TGFBI. And that was, I was talking with Justin Mason, the creator of TGFBI, earlier today, and that was huge because in that league it was one catcher, 2 util spots. And so I wasn't so hesitant to load up with 3 outfielders right off the bat. In that league I got Stanton, JD Martinez, and then Yelich. And I said at the time, like, I probably wouldn't do this in a typical league because I'd probably be like, well, I want, with that third pick, I'd probably need to get an infielder. I probably need to get, Corey Seager or somebody like that. But I think that was a valuable lesson I learned in that, you don't really need to be so position focused early on in the draft. Just load up with best available and piece together what you can a little bit later.
That's great advice there, is because people do get that way when you're looking at your draft. It's like, okay, I've gone so far, my middle infield looks weak, or I've gone so far, I've focused on the infield, my outfield looks weak, or pitching, whatever, like you're saying. If you can just focus on get your best available players, we've seen this year especially, and each year there's always, so many guys that come out of the woodworks. But just in general, so much depth became into play. Pitching was a whole different dynamic with pitchers not going so deep, openers. So there's so many more options available as the season went on to make things work, that you can always, if you're active on the wire, can make things work. Speaking of the wire, when you're handling all these teams, it's always been a thing of mine. And every year I try to tell myself I'm only going to do so many teams, and then I get suckered into this one and this one and this one and this one. How do you go about your fab process and handling it? Because when you're in, at the end of the year and you're still in competition like you were, you had to be grinding it out pretty good there. So what's your process like on a weekly basis for your fab?
Well, it's a lot of time on Sundays, and that's a part of it that's just taxing, and it's a grind, putting forth that kind of effort. It's not always possible every weekend. So you just got to do your best to kind of minimize the weekends missed. And I was able to do that this year. And yeah, really, with Tout Wars, they had it at like noon Central Time, the deadline. So it was kind of nice I'd wake up, have some coffee, kind of do my bids there, relax a little bit. Then later on, I'd probably spend a good 2-3 hours just turning over as many stones as possible, trying to see, 2-star guys. One of our guys who works here, Adam Wolf, does such a great job with our projected starters grid, and Todd Zola does the pitching ranking. So just trying to see, which 2-star guys could I maybe get who's not really a big reach, who might not destroy my ratios and could be a good play. So a couple hours every Sunday though was pretty much the case. Just going through the list of guys who have performed lately, sorting by recent performance, not necessarily by most owned, but going with guys who have been turning it on, seeing a lot of playing time. Obviously, opportunities really the driving force in fantasy. So just seeing guys who have the opportunity or are playing pretty well at the moment.
Okay. Obviously, TGFBI, this was year one, and that's pretty awesome to have your name put on that title for starters. And Justin's a friend of mine, and he's done amazing things in that, and it's only going to get bigger and better. I can't wait to see what's in store next year. He's going to do head-to-heads and roto. He's going to have a little bit of both to kind of appease the masses. You mentioned you won your NFBC online draft. How many years have you been doing the NFBC? Because that's a whole other animal right there.
Yeah, mostly I've been doing like the draft champions in recent years. This is my first time in the online championship. James Anderson and I got a chance to do Maine because the company had an open spot a couple years ago. That was a good learning experience. There's no suckers at those tables. It's just brutal. So we got our butts kicked there, and it was a good learning experience, though. But yeah, I was very fortunate in the online championship this year just to not only get Soto, but hit on guys like Aaron Hicks. Aaron Hicks was huge for me. Bueller, of course. And I paid up, and that was a rare instance where I paid up for like Kenley. I don't really like paying up for high price closers in those rounds, but I did get a share of Kenley. It was kind of bookended by 2 terrible months, but really the 5 months in between were really good. So didn't really ever have to go chasing any particular category, and that was really nice.
That's a nice way to work it out, because I was just curious. I've talked to a couple of other NFBC guys, and they always say, like you just mentioned with that year with James Anderson, is that first year is quite the learning experience because the NFBC is such a different animal. If you had to kind of see what you've learned from then till now, what kind of advice could you maybe give to a first timer to be like, hey, this is what's going to be a little different that you're going to have to pay attention to, otherwise you're going to drown?
Sure, yeah. The grind is one. The grind is really important because we missed a couple of weekends that year. We were, with the co-owner, ideally you're not missing any because somebody can jump in, but life got in the way a little bit. So we learned that lesson is can't really miss fab at all. But also, and this is something that Rob Silver, I'm sure you're familiar with him, talks about, and I think it's really good advice. Is just you don't have to hit a home run with every pick. You need a lot of doubles too. So as long as you're getting your value back on a lot of picks, you can find pockets of value a little bit later. You don't have to go forcing it, with either positional or categorical need early. I avoided the Byron Buxton landmines this year, the Billy Hamilton types, those guys who you go chasing after because you feel you need speed. I was able to do that. And yeah, just don't force the issue. Don't let the draft come to you. Don't necessarily worry about, I'm falling behind here, or I need to fill this roster spot. Just take the best player available and just continue to grind for 6 months.
Now that you won the NFBC, the online, are you going back into the main, or are you going to stay in the online world?
I would love to do the main, but if it's coming out of my pocket, I probably should.
Exactly. It's a little tough.
Yeah, another year of experience under my belt, probably.
Yeah, I got you. Before we go on to the positional stuff we were going to talk about, any final thoughts on the draft process, your season as a whole? Any advice to anybody out there?
I congratulate all the league winners of TGFBI, Colton the Wolfman, and Labor, Jake Seeley, and Tout Wars. A lot of great people in this industry. I just had one good year. I'm really nothing special. It's just it's about avoiding landmines too, kind of as we've talked about. Like, I was really fortunate on that front this year. Really, really fortunate. Next year, my fortunes could change, and they probably will. So, just keep your head up if you had a bad year, because your luck can change in a hurry.
No, and that's great advice, because you grind, but there's certain things you can't avoid. It's just out of your control, and it doesn't mean you're a bad owner or you don't know what you're doing. That's just how it kind of rolls that year. So it's a year-to-year process, and maybe you hit it big next year, and your next year's Clay Link. You never know. We'll see how it goes. But, let's go into some players. We're going to go kind of just for fun here, and we can go as deep as we want or as shallow as we want on these players. It's kind of a fantasy all-stars. You can call it whatever cheesy name you want to call it. Just kind of from our own perspective, what we're like, your top 3 at each position, my top 3, kind of a surprise guy to you. It could be off the wall stuff, it could be whatever you want, just kind of how you saw it impacting teams this year. It could be just, you can look at the rankings and go, okay, it's the top 3 guys, big deal. Or maybe it's a little deeper than that to you. But just kind of a fun way to wrap up the year, as it's some positions when I was making a quick list was deeper than deep. Like third base is ridiculously deep. We already knew that going into the year. This year, and look at the guys, it's crazy. But let's kick it off with the catcher's position. Give me your top 3 guys that you thought were fantasy all-stars this season at the catcher's position.
Well, I think JT Realmuto was kind of head and shoulders above the rest this year. The speed aspect of his game kind of went away a little bit, but good power, really did it all. So he was huge. Yadier Molina, somehow keeps getting it done. Him and Sal Perez are up there. Wilson Ramos, too. I think people got into a situation, and I had Ramos in TGFBI, and he was kind of, him and Kiermaier were my lone injuries, so I was super, super fortunate there. And of course, Ramos made it back, but he was a guy who in 2017 returned, and the numbers just at a glance looked bad. But after a couple of weeks, maybe the first month after he was back from that ACL injury, he was pretty much back to being himself. What he gives you in terms of power at that position, it's really hard to find. And so ended up being a really good value this season. I think, based on the two early mocks that I was a part of, he'll be a pretty good value again next year. We'll just have to see where he ends up. Biggest surprise, though, may have to be Isaiah Kiner-Falefa. He was not on my radar at all. He led the position in stolen bases. He wasn't anything too special, but at the position relative to his peers, he was all right.
That's a good sneaky surprise there, because he probably gained catcher eligibility like midway through the season when out of nowhere the Rangers just said, you know what, we love you, Robinson Chirinos, but we're going to start playing Falefa back there, like Kiner-Falefa. And it's like, okay, sure. And now he'll have catcher eligibility next year. So that's a really good surprise call there. For me, my guys were pretty much the same as you. I had Real Muto, Salvi, just because, like Yadier, like you said, they just keep getting it done. It's ridiculous. Real Muto's still super young, which if he can get on a contending team can be scary good. But my other one was Wilson Ramos as well. I was big on him. People called me crazy for having him. I think preseason I had him my 4th or 5th fantasy catcher on my rankings, and people were like, "You're an idiot." I was like, okay, we'll see how that goes. He hit 306. Find me a catcher that hits that high, and not named Buster Posey anymore, and that's pretty impressive to me. So you get him as late as you can there, and it really does some damage for your lineup. It's a good damage for your lineup. The kind of what was that?
Just one other name I'll throw out there real quick for next year, maybe Elias Diaz. I don't know what it's like, Francisco Cervelli next year, but if Diaz is the primary guy, he really impressed me with what he did, hitting for average and quite a bit of pop in a limited sample.
Yeah, Elias Diaz, I host a DFS show Monday through Fridays for baseball, and that was one of my favorite plays, especially when lefties were on the mound, but just in general. He was cheap, and when Cervelli was out, Elias Diaz produced. Like you said, he was very, very productive. You'll get him undrafted in a lot of leagues probably next year. Like, that's definitely a guy to keep an eye on. A surprise guy for me, because he finally started showing what he could do at the end of last year, or at the end of this year, and we'll see how it plays out in San Diego. But Austin Hedges finally showed the power. The average is still a concern, but he had 3 stolen bases. He hit 14 home runs in only 91 games. So if he becomes that number one they want him to be, could be really, really productive at another end of the draft type guy to look at the catcher's position.
Yeah.
All right, first base is loaded as you'd expect. Give me some of your first base all-stars.
Well, Freeman kind of tops the list. Freddie Freeman. Goldie, his speed kind of went away too, but after a slow start, the fact that he was able to finish with like a 290 average is really impressive. And the guy who was kind of left for dead, I know he's played other positions too, not left for dead. He was still like a top 200 pick, but Matt Carpenter, after a really down year, big power spike. I knew a bounce back was coming, but I didn't know bounce back to what exactly. Early on, I was looking like maybe he was just done. Maybe it's the back. Maybe it's, I don't know, age-related skills decline. Who knows? But he bounced back, and I think you could also throw, Rhys Hoskins, a bunch of other guys in there because it's a pretty deep position as well. Maybe not as deep as in past years, but I think Matt Carpenter's on this top 3 for me, just given how well he bounced back after that down year in 2017 and then the slow start this year.
Yeah. For those listening at home, we did not talk about this ahead of time, but we had the same 3 again, which would make sense for most of these rankings, but that's exactly who I had. And when it comes to, Freeman, he speaks for himself, just like you said. Goldschmidt, I kept telling guys, I had people asking me early on, do I trade him? I said, no, trade for him. Like, he's going to be fine. This is just crazy if people are jumping off this train because of this humidor talk. He's going to be just fine. And it turned out to be okay. But Carpenter, this is the one where I killed myself in TGFBI because I was reading reports that he was seriously hurt, like the shoulder or the back was an issue. And my team was drowning in injuries, and I dropped Matt Carpenter. So, yeah, that one I have not lived down, and I will continue to tell people about it because I will admit my mistake. And that was a hard mistake to swallow there because it was never the same. Let's put it that way. But watching him homer almost every night for a couple months hurt quite a bit. But yeah, those three definitely worked for me. And then what were your surprises?
I don't know how my surprise could be anybody other than Max Muncy.
Yeah, that's
How was Max Muncy so good? I didn't end up seeing like the final leaderboards, but I know in terms of WRC plus for the season, he was super, super high. I think he's eligible at what, third as well, but yeah, I did not see Max Muncy. I don't think anybody did. We write up like 1,200 guys for the magazine, and he was not among that 1,200. So yeah, he was just a guy that I did not see coming at all, and good for him, because it seems like, yeah, there'll probably be some regression, but he seems like he might be here to stay, at least in terms of a guy who's relevant.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's a very, very good pick on Fantrax. He's first, second, third eligible, outfield eligible. He's eligible everywhere pretty much. So you're going to have fun with that one. Yeah, 35 homers out of nowhere. Guy could barely survive in the minor leagues, and he comes out of this and just crushes it. So that's an obviously great surprise pick. Mine would be Jesus Aguilar in the similar vein, but at least we kind of maybe expected it a little more from Jesus, not to that extent. But once he finally got everyday playing time, he finished with 35 homers as well. Hit 274, which it actually surprised me he hit that well. So Jesus Aguilar would be my surprise, but Max Muncy was the guy I had written down right next to it. And if you wanted to, Carpenter is a surprise to many. So.
Same, man. And I think with Aguilar, it's interesting because he kind of got boxed in as a guy who was just like a short side platoon guy. But they gave him a chance to be more than that, and he showed he could be. So, yeah, that's a really good one because he ended up being like a top 5 first baseman, top 3 even.
Yeah, he's easily at least top 5 for sure. Maybe higher depending on your league for sure. He was he finished very, very high because his OBP was crazy. If you're in an OBP league, he had a really, really strong OBP to go with the power numbers. So yeah, definitely something to enjoy there. Second base, I already know who one of yours should be, but give me your 3.
Well, yeah, I think as a Reds fan, I will have to include Scooter. He'll probably be 3. I'm not going to include Jose Ramirez because he did not get to 20 games to qualify there next year. I think he got to 16, but I will include Javi Baez there instead of Short. So Javi, Witt Merrifield, and Scooter. I said this on Twitter in like May or June, but even after last year and as a Reds fan, I was not a believer in Scooter Gennett. I did not think he could repeat. I'm happy to say I was dead wrong. I'm really interested to see what his future looks like, where it is, because it's sounding more and more like he will sign an extension with the Reds. We'll see, but I think it's probably in their best interest to find a trade partner because they got a lot of guys coming who are infielders. So that'll be a really interesting story of the offseason with the Reds.
Yeah, I love what Scooter did this year. And like you said, doing it again. Like many thought he wouldn't duplicate it, and he did. I'd be shocked if they gave him an extension. It'd be great if they did. I think he's a heck of a ball player, and he fits that ballpark very, very well. But like you said, all the guys in the pipeline coming up, the draft picks they just made, they just gave Suarez a big deal. It's going to be tough to pay for that for sure. I got Javi. I got Whit Merrifield, who was just absolutely outstanding when many thought he couldn't do it again. Finishing with 45 stolen bases. Sure, the power regressed, but most of us expected that. I'll still take 12 and 45 with a 300-plus average any day of the week. And he's still – there's still some guys going over him for quote-unquote steals that I think I'll sit and wait for Witt next year. My last one, you took Scooter, so I'm going to go a little farther off the wall. Not so much a surprise, but Cesar Hernandez is a guy I absolutely loved this year for where you're drafting him at, and he still finished with 15 and 19 stolen bases. The average dropped a little towards the end of the year, but I'll go with him as my 3rd. I thought he was pretty good. I would have went out Ozzy, but his second half decline really, really, really hurt.
Yeah, man, it pains me to not include Ozzy because I loved him. And he had a good year, when you look at the final numbers. But yeah, that second half decline was weird, and it's hard to know because he didn't run as much as I expected what exactly the numbers are going to look like next year. Because if you're paying the full price again next year, you're kind of expecting 20-plus homers again, and we'll see about that. But I think my surprise is going to be Joey Wendell, a prospect that I was just never thought much of, but he finished really good numbers. A guy who's probably going to be top 3 or 4 in the American League Rookie of the Year voting. So not a guy that I really had. I think I had him in 1 league, and he was fine. He's really a profitable pickup. But I think, just looking at the numbers, they're even better than I realized.
Yeah, he was extremely productive. They liked him so much he was hitting third or fourth almost daily, which at the beginning of the year, you looked at the preseason rankings. I don't know what James had, but like team rankings, Joey Wendell was barely a top 25 guy. I think he was like around 18 or 19. Like he was not high up, and he was higher up obviously by the end of the season. But he started out the year much off the radar and did very, very well. So I like that a lot. My surprise, I'm not sure if he has enough eligibility next year for second base, but he had it this year, is Jose Peraza, your Cincinnati Red. I love this guy. I've been on his bandwagon. I've gotten in arguments with people that love Adalberto Mondesi, and I agree Mondesi is a stud. You can use him as a sleeper at short or second too. He's an absolute stud. But the price you're paying for him in those two early mocks compared to where you can get Jose Peraza, I think is going to continue to get better. And you know him much better than I do, so tell me if I'm wrong. I think he's a great surprise and definitely another later round value for next year.
Yeah, he was the guy I was going to pick, at short as a surprise. And he because I really think he was my biggest whiff all year. I said that 200-ish ADP was way too high. I was dead wrong. I watched him play pretty much every day, and he looked like a mess in 2017. There was a massive line drive rate dip from 2016 to 2017. I think it was like 7 percentage points. No power, no patience. Well, it turns out he had a little bit of power, at least in Cincinnati. Runs a lot, and a lot better hitter than I gave him credit for. Some of that line drive stabilization helped a lot. And it turns out, well, I think anyway, we'll end up looking at 2017 as more of an outlier than I thought was possible. I thought that'd kind of be closer to the baseline, but Ross is a lot better player than I thought he was.
Yeah, I was more worried about his swing and miss ability, but hitting 288 really opened my eyes to what we might see with this guy. So pretty excited by that. Let's go to the shortstop. Give me your top three at the shortstop position.
This was tough because, well, the first two not so tough, but the third was tough for me. And I included Baez at second, so I'm going to say Lindor, Story, and then I think I'm going to give it to Bregman over Machado. Machado played in all 162. He had a nice year. It was fine, but Bregman's leap into superstardom and really being the most valuable fantasy player, at least fantasy hitter on that team, was pretty shocking to me. Love the kid's attitude. He's got a chip on his shoulder, it seems like. Power was a lot greater than I expected, ran a little bit. So, 30-10 shortstop is really nice and hit for a high average, great counting stats. So he was the guy that, if you'd asked me what are the chances he's the Astros' most valuable roto hitter at the end of the season, I would have said maybe 5%. But he's a guy who, after a really slow start to his major league career, I'm sure you remember how poor of a start he got off to, has really blossomed into being the superstar most people thought he would be.
Yeah, Bregman is, if you can't root for Alex Bregman, you just don't like baseball, period. But fantasy baseball-wise, I remember that first half or the first run for him last year, everyone was calling for him to get sent down, and he's not any good. And I guess, the go-to every time was, well, Mike Trout wasn't great his first time too, guys. But Bregman is definitely – and he keeps improving. You see, like, every time you think he's kind of hit his peak, he keeps doing more and more. 31 homers. I thought maybe you'd have a better shot of seeing 25 steals and, 15 homers, but he flipped the script with 31 homers and 10 steals. He hits for solid average. Yeah, he plays a really good defense. The fact he can play short and third base without really missing a beat is outstanding with Bregman. I like that quite a bit. My other guys, Lindor and Trevor Story. I had Trevor Story one just for the fact that it was ridiculous what he did. He carried that team for a little while there in Colorado, and that's why they're playing the Brewers today. He's a freak. I did not expect this. I was off the Trevor Story bandwagon, and he shocked me. I'm going to ask you right now, did you expect this kind of production from Trevor Story?
Honestly, no, but I got him in a couple spots. I got him in the online championship, got him in TGFBI, just because I think it was like the 7th or 8th round, just a plausible upside pick. Guy playing in Coors with a lot of power, a lot of swing and miss too, and some risk. But I just thought the price was low enough to want to take the dive. I'll tell you this, next year I'll probably be fully out because it'll probably cost like a first-round pick, early second. Just given the plate approach, I don't know if I could pay that price. But let me get back to the Astros for a quick second and ask you a question. Mm-hmm. Who would you rather have next year between Bregman and Altuve?
Yeah, that's a tough one because that was another part that hurt my TGFBI team. I had the second pick and took Altuve. Yeah. Looking back on that one, that hurt. I think I'd have Bregman personally. I know the steals with Altuve, but he didn't even steal that much this year, and his power kind of declined. The average was there. You know, maybe he got healthy because he saw the last couple of weeks of the year he looked a little more Altuve-esque. But I think Bregman's going to keep improving. I think maybe the power is not going to be much more than 30 to 35, but that's fine. It's totally fine. I think the average is going to always be high. Steals might even go up a little bit. He's going to get better and better, and it's kind of like the progression I think we saw with Lindor and even Jose Ramirez, and he might not be like all the way to that production level, but I think this is what you're going to get from him year in and year out, where Altuve, he might have the ups and downs that we saw this year, which who knows, but you'll get a discount on Altuve either way next year.
Yeah, and that power fluctuation too with him, and didn't run quite as much. So, yeah, I think I'm with you. I think I'd rather have Bregman for 2019. It's pretty close.
Yeah, just it's very, very close. Like, you can't really hate either one, and I think a lot of it will be picked for you based on where you're drafting. Like, that's just going to be the way it goes. Question for you here, we can kind of keep – I like this kind of back and forth without following the script here. Carlos Correa, who killed many, you're going to get a heck of a discount. I think in the early mocks he's going in the third round right now, which you've looked at probably the ADPs on some other stuff, and we thought this year's draft was deep. Like, the first 3 to 4 rounds is ridiculous. Literally gives the point of take best available player. Carlos Correa, what are you kind of expecting from him next year? Because this was a massive disappointment.
Yeah, man, that's tough because I'm in the same boat with him as you are with Altuve, in that I had him this year and he burned me a few spots, and now it's kind of like, I'm trying to shake off that recency bias and shake it off, like the burn of owning him this year. But you're right about the first 3 or 4 rounds. There's so much awesome young talent in the game today that the first 4 rounds are stacked. It's a great time to be a fan, but I'll probably be back in the well next year, or go back to the well. But I think maybe outside the top 30 overall, quite honestly. I don't know if you're going to get that discount, just because, I think it was the back primarily that was the issue this year, but we don't really know exactly. And so, I think I'd rather have a guy maybe like Blake Snell, even Chris Bryant, those types. I like him, but I think if it's I'm not getting even a 10-point discount or 10-spot discount from where he was going this season, I think that's a little too pricey.
Okay, yeah, that's very fair. If he falls, then yeah, but if you have to pay for him, there's going to be much better options around there. You already said your surprise at shortstop was Jose Peraza. Mine was one of the only good things I did on TGFBI was Tim Anderson. The average is what you expected, but 2020 is outstanding. And the speed's for reals, the power, maybe not so much, but where you drafted him at, I think he's an insane surprise.
Oh, absolutely, man. That's a good one. Absolutely. I did not really have a ton of him, but yeah, he was a big profit guy.
All right, let's go to the third base position. You already got Bregman at shortstop. Who else you got here?
Yeah, Bregman at third. I think if I'm going to say 3 others, though, I'll say, Jose Ramirez, obviously, Arenado, and then my guy Gino, Eugenio Suarez. What a year he had, and kind of fizzled a bit late, but, from start to finish, the numbers were really good. And I know he probably won a lot of people their leagues. I was not really on him, ended up with a couple shares, but he's a guy that kind of like Jeanette, that I wasn't really a full-on believer, but he's convinced me. And as long as he's in Cincinnati, he will be for a long time after signing an extension recently. I think he'll continue to be a really nice roto guy as the cleanup hitter behind Votto.
Yeah, I love Eugenio Suarez. I think he's a hell of a ball player. Arenado, Jose Ramirez, and Machado for me, pretty self-explanatory across the board there. What I did want to ask you, I wanted to wait till we talked about Jose Ramirez here. Looking at drafts, and especially these 2 early mocks, but even last year, do you go Jose or do you go Francisco Lindor?
I'm taking Lindor. The thing that worries me about Jose Ramirez at that spot, and I don't think you could really go wrong picking them top 5. One thing with a guy like that I worry about is as a guy who's a really good slugger, and he's kind of a middle of the order guy, not like Lindor who leads off. Is he going to run as much? I just don't know. It's hard for me to bank on him running as much. He was running wild this year, and that was a big part of his value. I think he'll continue to hit for 30 homer pop, but I'm a little worried that the Indians, even if there's some little tweak in spring training or something, maybe they slow down on the bases, don't run so much, and so even if he gives back 10 steals, that's a great season, but 10 steals worth of value is still a lot. So I'm on board with him as a borderline top 5-ish pick, but I'm of those like kind of top 5 guys in the early going here, these 2 early mocks, he's the one that I'm most hesitant about returning top 5 value.
Yeah, I can see that. It's going to be hard for a guy his size to continually put up 30-plus stolen bases. Eventually that wall is going to happen, and it'll hit for sure. Who's your surprise third baseman?
I liked him as a prospect, but I did not think that Miguel Andujar would have as good a season as he did. Top 10 in terms of earned dollars. I know the defense is a little shaky, but he's a guy who's just time and again was hitting for home runs, hitting for average. Obviously, a good setup to be in there in New York with a great team. So he was a guy that I thought would be good eventually, but I did not expect him to be a kind of a stud right away.
Yeah, that's exactly what I had with Miguel Andujar. I thought he'd be good. I didn't expect him, A, to get this much playing time this year, and B, be that productive. When you're hitting 27 homers and hitting for average as a rookie in New York, I was just absolutely amazed by what he did there. He kind of, for a little while there, held Gleyber Torres back, and Gleyber kind of moved around the diamond, but then he thought that's where he would go at third base for a while there, and that didn't work out. So I think Andujar has just shocked me. And honestly, it's very debatable, and maybe you have a different opinion. I'd give him the Rookie of the Year personally in the AL, but Shohei Ohtani, sure, he deserves it. He's great as both hitting and pitching, obviously. But I think Andujar much, much more important to what happened in New York.
Yeah, man, me too. And I'm kind of embarrassed to admit this, but I was kind of a guy who's like, oh, Brandon Drury, nice pickup, Yankees. I could see that.
You weren't the only one.
I thought he got an opportunity, especially in New York. He could actually be a guy in fantasy who's very useful, but turned out that Andujar took that and ran with it, and who knows what happens to Drury now. His future is probably with yet another organization.
Yeah, he's super talented, and I thought when he's coming back and torching it in the minor leagues by his rehabbing, I even think I put small bids out for him and got him in a couple leagues, thinking, okay, here we go. But like you said, Andujar didn't let it go, and Drury, who is very, very good, he's going to have to go somewhere else and figure it out. Heck, the Giants out here always need a third baseman. Eventually, Longo's going to disappear again. So you never know. Anything can happen.
Be a pretty good fit, but that totally sapped
all the power. Yeah, it ruins all the fantasy appeal.
Already modest power, but we'll see.
Yeah, he'll find a home somewhere. Let's go to the outfield where you could pick a million different players here, but give me a couple of your top players.
So, Mike Trout, obviously, it pains me a little bit I'm not including him, actually, but just because he missed time, there were such other standouts, and those being Mookie Betts, JD Martinez, and Christian Yelich. I know Yelich, I got him 19th in that too early mock. That was, before like the massive final 2 weeks. And so really interested to see where he goes. I think he'll probably be a first rounder, if not a mid first rounder come March.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if he gets out of the first round. That's for sure. Especially if you're drafting with Vlad Sedler, you probably won't get him out of the first round. So that's probably a given. I had the same 3, so that's not going to change much. There could be a ton of surprises. What's one of the surprises for you?
Yeah, Nick Markakis.
Oh, big time. Yeah. Who had him on the radar? Just be honest.
I picked him up like early on just because he was like on a tear and batting behind Freeman, but I did not expect anything at all from him. And I know the power was not really there late, but really what he did in terms of the counting numbers and the batting average was great. And he was probably cost you $1 if you got him in a deep league or really cheap in fab. So he was a pretty big difference maker, and I did not see, especially at his age, him coming close to that.
Yeah, that was very, very surprising. My surprise would be Mitch Hanger. I thought he'd be okay, but not 26 homers, the 285 average and 8 steals. Okay, he was very, very good. 90 runs, 93 RBIs. He produced across all fantasy stats for you very, very well, and you got him rather good price on him at draft time. So Mitch Hanger would be my guy. He kind of quieted down after an insanely hot start, but he still kind of kept it going towards the end. So he'll be my outfielder.
Yeah, he's a good one because I was not on him at all either. I remember we did this thing. It was like a toss-up between Haniger and Victor Robles coming into the season. I said it was really like a draw. I felt like they both maybe thought there was a chance Victor Robles would out-earn Mitch Hanger. But Haniger had a really good year, and he's a guy I'm still a little skeptical of heading into next season, but he really had a tremendous season.
Yeah, I'm fully not on the bandwagon yet, but he definitely will help. You know, if it's between him and some other guy, this last year will definitely help push me his direction. Unlike last year, I didn't want anything to do with him at draft time. Speaking of those young outfielders, we're gonna have Acuna, we're gonna have Soto, who you already mentioned you got in the NFBC. How do you approach those two come draft time? Because their price tags might be worse than Ozzie Albies last year.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm on board with Acuna as a first-round guy.
First round.
Yeah. Actually, in that too early mock, I took JD, and obviously I was going to take JD, but I thought Acuna should be like one of the next few guys taken. I just think what we saw this season in a limited sample, just off the charts. I mean, he's on par with the best in the game, talent-wise. As long as he's healthy, and that was big that he didn't suffer a more serious injury when he stepped on that bag and his knee bent so awkwardly. As long as he avoids any issues, I think he could be – like maybe the number one overall guy. I mean, I think he has the tools to do that.
That wouldn't shock me at all. That's actually a good call. All right, starting pitchers, absolutely loaded as you'd expect. Give me a couple of your top starting pitchers for you this season.
Sure, yeah. Well, I got to include Scherzer. I'm going to include DeGrom, and I'm going to include Snell. Verlander, obviously right up there, but I think DeGrom, maybe for roto purposes, the lack of wins, maybe it was a little frustrating, but having an ERA that low, like 75 points or whatever it was, lower than the next lowest in the NL, just an insanely awesome season for him. And Snell was the reason that I had such a good season. And Scherzer. I think Scherzer is a guy that, because he's kind of in his tier now. It used to be the kind of Kershaw in his own tier. And this past draft season, it was, that top four, that big four. Now it's kind of Scherzer alone in that top tier. And I just think at his age, we just don't know if the cliff's going to be gradual or if it's going to be steep. And I'm just a little worried that, he's getting up there, and I don't want to pay full price for Scherzer next season.
Yeah, after the last few years, I'm finding it harder and harder to pay full price for a lot of these guys because it's just one injury and it completely ruins what you have going. But you can't draft expecting the injury. But Scherzer, 300 Ks again, 2.5 ERAs. He's that good, like you said. Everything about him. It's interesting this year because we had the big four you mentioned last year. It looks like I haven't really broke it down, but we could almost combine kind of the 1A and 1B tier, and it's gonna be pretty deep this year compared to what it looked like last year. So that'll be fun, in the offseason, kind of breaking all that down. But I had Scherzer, DeGrom, and then mine was Aaron Nola. He was my long shot NL Cy Young winner going into the season, and he lived up to the hype, in my opinion. He was absolutely outstanding. So Nola is definitely a guy that I think still not getting the full respect based on those two early mocks. So I'm looking forward, if I can get him around that same draft time next year, I'll be very, very happy.
Yeah, man, I liked Nola coming in, but I really liked what I really liked about him was the price. Mm-hmm. And yeah, he's gonna be marked up next year, but I agree that's probably not as much as he should be. And so yeah I'm gonna probably be on him again.
Yeah, based on just the early numbers, and obviously a lot can change, but I definitely, if I have to, go early on a Kluber or something, but I can wait 3 rounds and get a Nola, or 2 rounds and get a Nola, I'd probably get the bat and get Nola later. That's kind of what I'm looking at.
Yeah, I know I said earlier that my strategy, which led to some success this season, was kind of hitters first 4 and then, or first 3 at least, then 4 through 8. Try to hit some pitching. But I think next year, like in the third, I'd be willing to pay up a 3rd-round price for 2 guys, and that's Snell and Nola. So I think if I get one of those guys in the third, I'll be pretty happy.
Yeah, I think Snell is as legit as it comes, and he was my surprise. You could have him in the top 3 easily. I was lazy and put him at surprise. He's been everything you could dream of and more. 221 strikeouts and 180 innings pitched is just insane, absolutely insane. And I think he's great. What would one of your surprises be if you haven't mentioned it yet?
Well, I mean, one thing, last thing on Stell is just doing it against, two 100-win teams. I mean, his success against those clubs is really impressive. I got a couple I want to shout out. One being Miles Michaelis, coming up back from overseas. I didn't know what to expect. The K's were really underwhelming, but he was like a top 20-ish overall pitcher despite a really low K rate. So, it's a lot of finesse, a lot of dropping in that curve for called strikes. But I think he can do it for a little while yet. I think he'll be undervalued probably just because people want more Ks than he probably gives. Another one, though, Kyle Freeland.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have Kyle Freeland anywhere. I didn't really watch much of him, but he was going head-to-head against Buehler like a couple weeks ago, and finally got my eyes on him. And I was really impressed. Really crazy season he had.
Yeah, Freeland was the other guy I had written down next to Snell. Freeland and a lot of that Rocky staff, they on paper, and hopefully it carries over to next year, have figured out Coors. They actually figured out how to pitch in Coors, and it's impressive what Freeland did there. If you consider, quote unquote half his starts were at home, he has a 2.85 ERA, and you never would have thought that would ever happen for a guy that starts half his games at Coors Field. And when you're looking at the fantasy stats, that is game changing because even people forget come next draft season that the numbers were that good because they'll see Colorado next to his name in the draft room, and you're going to be able to get him pretty good. So I think that's a really good call for sure.
Yeah, he was. It's a thing where it's like I'm probably going to continue to admire him from afar just because no pitcher has ever really been able to consistently beat Coors. Coors inflates runs by 30%, and so repeat seems ill-advised to me, but I respect what he's done.
Yeah, and that's the hard part because you got him, you got Germán Marquez, who's been outstanding. Like the run he had in the last couple months of the season was just filthy. Yeah. But then again, you have John Gray, who looked like he figured it out last year, and then this year couldn't do anything. Mm-hmm. I'm sure he was injured a bit, but you got to have that in the back of your mind too. Is like, okay, Gray looked like the guy. It didn't work, so can Freeland and Marquez be that guy still? Like you said, you might be better off just watching from afar, but I don't know. Those numbers are pretty darn good.
Yeah. Marquez, I'm a little bit more interested in, and based on those 2 early mocks, he seemed like a guy who could be a nice, small pocket of profit guy. But I'm a little hesitant just given the setting, man. It's how many guys have consistently beat Coors? It was like Ubaldo for a couple seasons, and that's about it. So.
Yeah, and that's crazy when your sentence starts and ends with Ubaldo Jimenez. So it tells you everything you need to know right there. Let's wrap it up with the relief pitchers, and you already mentioned one was a staple on your championship teams, but give me some of your top relievers.
Yeah, I'm going to say, Blake Trinan. I mean, I might have to get a Trinan jersey just because of how he carried me in every league this year, but Edwin Diaz, of course, too. It's a historic season. Thought he had a chance to become just the second relief pitcher ever to get to 60 saves. He got close. Didn't quite get it. And all the third, you could give it to a lot of guys, but Josh Hader being just so dominant, just filthy. Even when he wasn't seeing consistent save chances, he'd come out for a relief outing and strike out 7 or 8. He was just incredibly valuable. So he's a guy that, even without regular saves, and I think he ended up with how many,
12 saves.
12. He was still a top 5 earner according to our calculator. So he's there. I think my surprise is Jose Leclerc. I had a lot of Keone Kela, and that was pretty nice. I got a half season's worth of saves. And then Leclerc's, peripherals were good, but I did not expect him to be as good as he was. He's a guy that, assuming that the Rangers enter spring training with most of that same relief core, maybe they could trade Leclerc, but I'd imagine he'd enter as the closer, and I think he's going to be a pretty good value because of how bad that team was, I don't think people will give him enough credit.
Yeah, I had the same 3 as you did. What Josh Hader did, I'm so glad I grabbed him in a couple leagues. He was filthy. And what he did leads me to my next question for you is, do you see I'm a fan of saves holds. Some people want to stay strong with saves. But the way the bullpens are starting to be used these days, managers are actually getting smart and realizing not all saves are in the ninth inning. Are you starting – do you feel that we should change most leagues to saves holds now?
I'm actually not a big saves plus holds guy personally, just because holds are so plentiful. And
that's true.
I just think, managers are being more creative in how they use the back end, but I think that kind of adds a new wrinkle of strategy, and I think that's kind of cool. So I just think with saves plus holds, it's like so plentiful that it doesn't really – it kind of eliminates some of the strategy and the skill of the game, just because everybody can load up on relievers and really good. There's so many good back end guys, even if they're not seeing save chances. Like Ottavino had a great year. A lot of those setup guys are pretty nasty, and when you have saves plus holds, I just think the solds are a little too plentiful.
No, that's a good point. Like, because, when they start coming in the sixth inning, that's kind of worthless just by a lefty coming in and getting one out, stuff like that. Yeah, that's pretty rough. Maybe if there's a better way to define it, it'd be better. Or I guess make all your pitching spots just pitcher eligible, not require certain to be starters, starting to be relievers. And you can strategize that way and go that direction. I think might be a decent way to go about it as well. The other thing is you have guys like Ryan Yarbrough, who was the main cog in the opener, one of the main cogs for the Rays. He had a 3.91 ERA, 128 Ks, 16 wins, and he only started 6 games. Mm-hmm. How do you plan on approaching this opener strategy next year? Because we're seeing it more and more. Heck, we saw the Brewers do it to open their game today, and it worked out very well. The A's did it last night. I think it's going to be something we see more and more into the future.
Yeah, I do too. I don't know what's actionable with it, though. I still want to avoid those long relievers types, those primary pitcher types. I ended up picking up Yarbrough, and if you kind of had him in your lineup for a good chunk of the season, he was really profitable. But I still want to focus on guys who are going to give me 5 at least. 5 and dive isn't so bad anymore. So if I can get some, fill my staff, the back end of my staff with a couple 5 and dive guys, I'm fine. I just don't know what's actionable with strategy, just given this revolution we're seeing. I think maybe in future years we're just going to have, you're going to have to take some of those primary pitcher types. But for the time being, I want a guy who has every 5 days starting, and he's going as deep as he can.
All right. Well, that'll wrap us up on the players. Any final thoughts on the 2018 fantasy baseball season before we wrap it up?
Not really, man. I had a good time talking with you, Brian. It was good to meet you, and I appreciate you having me on. We're already on to our magazine prep here at RotoWire, so it's just, give us a try. RotoWire.com/free for a free 10-day trial. No credit card required. No strings attached at all. If you don't like it, just don't sign up after the 10 days are up. But I think most people will probably like what we're doing. We got a lot of good off-season stuff planned, podcasts and consensus rankings. So we're focusing primarily on the magazine right now, but we'll have a lot of stuff up in the meantime.
Yeah, go try out that trial, guys. I think you'll really, really enjoy it. They cover all the sports. They do it all very, very well. Like I said, it was me, and I think I joined had to be close to 10 years ago now. Like I was out of college, but it was a long, long time ago. It's been a while. So really good stuff. They're super, super helpful. So go check them out. And people that listen to my show know that I am not the biggest fan of paying for content, but if it's good, I promote it. And I really do like what you guys do there. So
I really hope to do this again.
Oh, we will. We will definitely do this again. Like I said, I like what you guys do. You're all very good, knowledgeable people, and I can sit there and chat with you guys all day long. Go check out Clay on Twitter at ClayWLink. Clay, it's been a pleasure, man. Appreciate it.
It has been fun. Talk to you soon.
Yeah. Everybody, this is Bench with Bubba, episode 124, recap on the fantasy baseball season. Catch you guys later.